My mom says you're the only adult who shows up. He said it the way 11-year-olds say things, sideways, while doing something else. He was jamming a shin guard into a bag that was already full and he wasn't looking at me at all. It was a Tuesday in September. 6:15 in the evening, getting dark early already, and the two of us were the last ones on that field because we were always the last two on that field. I said, "Shows up where?" And he said, "Anywhere," and zipped the bag, and then he said, "See you Thursday, coach," and walked off toward the parking lot. And I stood on a municipal soccer field in Zanesville, Ohio, holding a mesh bag of orange cones, and I could not move. Because here's the thing about that sentence. I have a son, he's 24. His name is Ellis, and he lives in Denver, and I have seen him twice in 6 years, and the reason for that is not complicated, and it is not anybody's fault but mine. I drove a route for 18 years, Columbus to Erie to Buffalo and back, 4 nights a week, sometimes 5. Ellis played 4 years of high school baseball. I made 6 games. So a child I'd known for 5 weeks handed me the single most generous sentence anybody has ever said about me, and it was also, without him having any idea, the worst thing I have ever been told. My name's Wes Tanner. I'm 47. I stopped driving long haul in 2019, and I run the parts counter at a truck dealership on Maple Avenue, which is a smaller life, and I like it. I started coaching U12 rec soccer 3 seasons ago for a reason I'm not going to dress up. The league sent an email saying they were 4 coaches short and would have to cancel 2 teams, and I read it in a parking lot on a Sunday, and I thought, I know exactly how to be the adult who doesn't come. I've had 18 years of practice at it. I don't know anything about soccer. I want to be clear about that. I read a book. The kids figured out in about a week that I didn't know what I was doing, and they were extremely gracious about it, which is a thing I've noticed about 11-year-olds. They'll forgive almost anything except not turning up. The boy was Micah Cole, number 14. Not the best player on that team and not the worst. Quick, small for his age, and the only kid out there who did the drills exactly the way I explained them, even when the explanation was wrong. And his mother was a woman named Marisa, who I had, at that point, spoken to for a total of about 90 seconds across 5 weeks. I started paying attention after that Tuesday. That's all. I didn't do anything clever. And here's what I put together over about 3 weeks. Marisa Cole was 35. She worked days at a dental office in Newark, and 3 nights a week at a call center off Route 40. Which is why she wasn't at practice, which is why I'd spoken to her for 90 seconds. Micah walked to practice, 2.25 miles along Adamsville Road, which has no sidewalk for the last half mile of it. He'd been doing that since August. He'd never once mentioned it, and no other parent had noticed, and I hadn't noticed either because he was always already there when I arrived, standing by the goal with his bag. His father lived in Reynoldsburg, 40 minutes. He had every other Saturday. I found out in October, not from Micah, and not from Marisa, that as of that month he had missed 11 consecutive scheduled Saturdays. 11. And every single one of those Saturdays, an 11-year-old had packed a bag on a Friday night. That's what shows up meant. It wasn't a compliment about me, it was a measurement of everybody else. If you're still here, and I know this is where people decide whether they want the rest, do me one favor and hit subscribe. Because about 2 weeks after that, another parent on that team made a phone call about me, and she was right to, and what happened next is the reason I'm telling you any of this. Now, the rides. I started driving him home in the middle of October. I'd like to tell you I thought it through. I didn't. It got dark at 7, then 6:40, then 6:20, and there was a kid walking a road with no sidewalk in a hooded sweatshirt, and one Thursday I said get in, and that was the whole decision. I told Marisa, I want that on record because it matters. I called her that first night and left a message, and she called back at 10:40 from a call center parking lot and said thank you about 4 times in a way that made me feel worse rather than better. What I did not do was tell the league. Youth soccer in our county has a 2-adult rule. You do not transport a child alone. It's in the coach's handbook, it's in the volunteer training I sat through and half listened to, and I broke it 11 or 12 times without ever once thinking about it. Because I was a 47-year-old man who had decided he was one of the good ones. On the 4th of November, a woman named Denise Ackroyd, mother of number 8, a kid called Tyler, called the league office and reported it. I found out because the league director called me at work. And I want to be extremely clear about what I felt in that moment, because it was not what I'd have predicted. It wasn't outrage. It was about 4 seconds of pure, cold understanding. She was right. Not right about me. Write about the rule. Because the rule isn't there for men who are one of the good ones. It's there because nobody can tell from the outside, and a kid whose father misses 11 Saturdays in a row is exactly the kid a rule like that exists to protect. So I told the director he was correct, that I'd broken it, that I'd stopped that day, and that if he wanted to remove me from the team I understood. He didn't remove me. He put a note in my file and made me redo the training module, which took 90 minutes, and which I actually paid attention to the second time. And then I had to solve the actual problem, which was that a kid still had to get home in the dark. What we did was boring, and I've come to believe the boring answer is almost always the right one. I called Denise Aykroyd myself. That conversation was uncomfortable for about 90 seconds, and then it wasn't. She lives 4 streets from the Coles. Tyler and Micah had never spoken to each other in their lives. After that, number 8's mom drove number 14 home twice a week for the rest of the season. Marisa found out about the complaint from Micah, who found out about it in a car from Tyler, which is how information actually moves. She called me on a Sunday afternoon and she was not thankful and she was not gracious. She was furious, and she wasn't furious at Denise Aykroyd. She said, "Do you understand what that phone call was actually about? It wasn't about you. Somebody looked at my son and decided he was a kid who needed protecting from an adult. Because of me. Because I'm not there." I said that wasn't what it meant. And she said, "Wes, I work 6 days. I don't have a choice about the 6 days. And every single week I get a new piece of evidence that the 6 days are costing him something, and I can't do anything with the evidence except carry it." And then she said the thing that I've thought about more than anything else anybody said that whole year. She said, "You want to know what I actually told him? Because he's quoting me and he got it wrong. He asked me why his dad doesn't come. And I said, because some adults show up and some don't. And it's not about how much they love you, and I don't have a better answer than that. And I said, look at your coach. He doesn't have to come. He comes." That's what I said. I didn't say the only. He put the only in. She was quiet for a second, and then she said, "But he's not wrong, is he?" I told her about Ellis 2 weeks later, standing in a parking lot after a game she'd managed to get to. I told her the number 6 games out of 4 years. I told her I used to call from truck stops on Friday nights and ask him how it went, and he'd tell me, and I'd say, "That's great, buddy," and then I'd drive to Buffalo. And I told her the part I've only said out loud twice, which is that the last real conversation I had with my son, when he was 19, he said, "Dad, you're going to be sad about this later, and I'm not going to be able to help you with it," which is the most accurate prediction anybody has ever made about me. I said, "So when your kid told me I was the only adult who shows up, I want you to understand what that was like. Because I'm not the adult who shows up. I'm the other one. I'm the guy in the story you told him about. I'm just doing it for somebody else's son on a Tuesday, because it's cheap and it doesn't cost me anything." And Marisa said, "That's a very well-organized way of feeling sorry for yourself." I said, "Excuse me?" And she said, "It costs you 2 evenings a week, and every Saturday from August to November, and you've done it 3 years, and you didn't know any of us when you started." She wasn't being kind about it. Her voice was flat. "You can be the man who missed it, and the man who shows up. Those aren't 2 different people, Wes. It's the same guy at 47 instead of 29. Then she said, "Have you called him?" And I said no. And she said, "Right, so do that, instead of standing in a parking lot explaining yourself to me." Micah's father came to a game on the 8th of November. He turned up at halftime. He stood at the far end near the corner flag by himself, and he stayed about 30 minutes, and he left before the end. And Micah, this is the part I'd take out of my memory if I could. Micah was polite. To him, careful. He said hi, and he said thanks for coming, and he did not run at him, and he did not ask if he was staying. He was 11 years old, and he had already learned to manage his own expectations in public. He came back over to the bench afterward and picked up his water bottle and said, "That was my dad." I said, "I know." He said, "He's got work." And then he said, "Are we doing the shooting thing on Thursday?" I said yes, and that was all of it. That was the entire conversation. I called Ellis that night from my kitchen at 9:40. He did not pick up. I left a message that took me 3 attempts and that I will not repeat because it was not good. He called back 11 days later, and that first call was 4 minutes long and mostly weather. The second one, in December, was 40 minutes. That was 2 years ago. Ellis came in July. He stayed 5 days. It was awkward for two of them and then it wasn't. And on the Saturday he came to a game with me because there was nothing else to do in Zanesville on a Saturday. Micah is 13 now. Still small, still quick, plays for the middle school now, still does the drills exactly the way you explain them. He came over at halftime and looked at Ellis and said, "Are you his son?" And Ellis said, "Yeah." And Micah said, "Cool," and went back on, and I had to go and stand behind the bench for a minute. Marissa and I took a long time. I want to be honest about that, because I've noticed people expect it to be quick, and it should not have been quick. She was my player's mother. I'd made a mistake that got a phone call made about me. There was a right way to do that, and the right way was slowly and out in the open, and it took us until the following spring to have dinner without it being about Micah. She still works 6 days. That hasn't changed, and it probably won't. I do school pickup on Wednesdays now, which I am insured and background checked and cleared to do, because we filled in the forms like adults. And Micah's dad has been to 4 games in 2 years, which is more than 11 Saturdays of nothing, and Micah tracks it, and doesn't say anything about it, and I have learned not to either. One last thing. Denise Ackroyd called the league office about me, and I have never once been able to work out how I feel about it. Half of me says, she looked at a boy getting into a car with a grown man she barely knew, and did the correct thing, and that a county with more Denise Ackroyds in it is a safer county for kids like Micah, and that my hurt feelings are not a factor. The other half remembers a kid walking 2¼ miles on a road with no sidewalk in the dark, and the fact that the rule had no answer for that at all. I had to go and build the answer out of a phone call and a stranger's minivan. So tell me in the comments, was she right to make that call, or should she have asked me first? I've gone back and forth on it for 2 years and I have never landed. And if you sat through all of that with me, subscribe. There's a new one every week, and every single one of them is about somebody who found out too late what showing up was worth. Thanks for sitting with me.